We are officially past the halfway point. We're in week 4, people. Welcome to the Athletes Unlimited preview show. I'm Savannah Collins, joined by my co-host, Christina Williams. Last year, a year ago, 3 out of the 4 captains were competing in the NCAA tournament, and now they are leading their own teams as pros with AU. Christina, did you ever expect that this group of newcomers, and particularly the rookies, would take over the league like they have in 2023?
Absolutely not, Savannah. Actually, I think that this was expected of the class of 2022 to come out and be breakout stars, namely because let's go with NaLyssa Smith, for example. She started all 32 games for the Indiana Fever. And then you talk about the leadership. She has her former coach here in Carlos Knox, but also Kelsey Mitchell and teammates Lexi Hall here as well. And so I think that that has all contributed to her success, just the familiarity of those teammates and a former coach being here at AU. And then in the WNBA, NaLyssa played against some top opponents in her position, doing it on both ends of the floor in the WNBA. And that's definitely translating here to her game at Athletes Unlimited.
Yeah, I'll admit, Smith was one of my most anticipated players coming into this season. I was so excited to see her step into this role with AU. And I think about back on media day when I met her for the first time and we were chatting about the season, just recognizing like she's coming off of a W season where she had a lot on her shoulders, and stepping into here where there were no expectations. I was excited for that. So she was one that I really was like, okay, if there's anybody that I think is going to come in here, her style of play, her size was going to dominate. It was NaLyssa. But what about Naz Hillmon? I mean, I know she, as the Atlanta Dream season progressed, she really started to break out, especially when it came to rebounding. But was she one that you kind of saw coming in this way?
So Naz actually, when she played in college at Michigan, she was one of the top athletes in the history of the program. And so I think that she's just getting back to doing that. I think people forget that when you get drafted into the WNBA, sometimes you have to accept a role that's maybe a little bit lesser of what you did in college. And so Naz, I think that she's just showing us who she's always been as a player, someone who, again, gets it done on both ends of the floor. And then also the experience. I know early in week 1, I saw her mom sitting in the audience. She is a 3rd-generation college player, a 2nd-generation pro. Her mom played, her grandmother played basketball. So I think that the influences around her as well. It's just greatness is within Naz. And so it doesn't surprise me. She ranked 5th among all WNBA rookies, so her peers in the 2022 class as well. And so I think we're just getting a dose of what she's always been.
Yeah, I have so loved getting to know Naz, especially just if you watched the Captain's Journal a couple of weeks ago, just about her experience. And she talked about how her mental side of the game and her ability to be a captain, lead a team, make a practice plan, have a strategy is so far beyond her years. But that's a side that you don't get to see when they're a rookie in the W. And I've loved that AU has just let her step into this role and being a captain. But if there's one that I think has totally started to redefine who she is and might be as a pro, it's Kierstan Bell. She was fantastic at FGCU. Didn't see her a ton in her first year with the Aces, no wonder, with that being such a stacked roster. But here, she has shot to the top of the leaderboard. And we have to talk about KB. I know we'll talk about her almost all day today.
Yeah, KB. I mean, she's one of my favorite players, namely because, I've watched her in college and then also around the 2022 draft as someone who covers the WNBA, kind of got close with her just to learn a little bit more about her. And I love her confidence coming into AU again. She only averaged about 5 minutes with the Aces in her rookie season, but she was surrounded around some great talent in A'ja Wilson, De'Erica Hamby last season, Kelsey Plum, Chelsea Gray, and they won a championship title. And although she did not have that impact on the floor throughout the season, I mean, in practices, just being able to learn from a coach like a Becky Hammon, I think that definitely helped her game, and we can see it. It translates. The Aces, they are a 5-out 3-point shooting team. We see how that affects Kierstan's play coming into AU. She's one of the most efficient 3-point shooters here at AU this season. Just her experience here has built her confidence week over week, and we're seeing that translate in the stats. in the leaderboard as well. She jumped 6 spots. And so, yeah, KB, I like seeing this version of her.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see how KB is going to lead her own team. All of that time getting to just be a sponge in that setting of amazing basketball minds with the Aces. Like, what kind of offense is she going to run? What are they going to pull out in practice? What are we going to see from her team they gain? So we might as well go ahead and take a look at how these teams shaped up. Obviously, the 3 athletes that we mentioned, plus the undeniable, the gold team captain, Odyssey Sims. We'll start with the purple squad with Naz Hellman and take a look at who she drafted this week. So the first thing that sticks out to me about Naz's team is that it looks very similar to last week. So she's got some repeat picks, Gray, Cloud, Burton, and Harris. That's a big chunk of the roster. And then maybe where she didn't get the same pick as week 3, she got a similar type of player. So she didn't get Jasmine Walker, and instead she got Teresa Blazon. So in that same pick, she went out and got her big. Where she didn't get Chrissy Bellick, she got Danny McCray. So getting her forwards in the same cadence at the same time in the draft has really stuck out to me. Is I think Naz found something that worked for her last week. She finally went 2-1. She's getting better week to week as a captain. The only piece she's missing is Lexi Brown. Instead, she really has Kirby Burkholder in that role. Kirby's going to have to play some tough D in the way that Lexi does, but I think she's going to be expected to be the long-range shooter on this team with Teresa Blazon.
Then I'm looking at that defensive lineup in this roster. Natasha Cloud, she made WNBA All-Defensive First Team last season. And then Alicia Gray, one of the best two-way players in women's basketball, averaging 5.56 rebounds, 1.7 assists. She's an all-around player that does everything on the floor. She dives for loose balls, she blocks shots, and she can go coast to coast and score in transition. So I'm super excited to see how this group pans out for Team Hillman. Now, looking at Team Bell. This is the first week that Kirsten Bell is not playing alongside Odyssey Sims this season. So again, I'm really interested to see how she pans out in terms of her leadership on the floor, how she rotates her players on the roster as well. And what's interesting enough is that on Twitter during the draft, there was an interesting tweet that came out. It said teammates to enemies in KB. She retweeted and said she the ops now. So great competition. Great things to play for this week between KB and Sims.
I really thought that KB was going to go out there and steal Team Sims' usual number 1 pick with Jordan Canada. When they were in the locker room after the game, she looked at Odyssey and said, "I'm stealing your whole team." So she made Odyssey a little nervous on draft day. And that's why when she picked Isabel Harrison for her number 1 pick, why Odyssey looked so shocked. She genuinely thought she wasn't going to get to play with Jordan Canada this week. But talking to KB, her reasoning with that was she knows that Isabel Harrison is a guaranteed 30 points every game. That was straight from KB's mouth. And one of the things that she really wanted to do when forming her first team is a team who plays the game the right way. That was her words. And for her, that's defined by a team that really moves and shares the ball well, that they're able to run the floor and rotate in off the bench. Those are really her big priorities when it came to making her team. I'm interested to see how she runs one as a captain. I'm so excited for her this week. Next, we'll look at Team Smith. Man, she's got it going on. She has locked in how to go 2-1 in this league, and I'm interested to see if she can repeat it and do it again. She said she's getting the team back together at the draft. What that was in reference to was week 2. She's back again with Kelsey Mitchell and Sydney Colson. I think those two are her core. Adding Brown to that mix, that's going to be killer. I think that this will be the toughest team to defend and expect high scoring games from this group when you really look at those first couple picks for Smith. She picked up 2 players who had a breakout week 3 in Rivers and Bellick. Christina, I know those two impressed you. What do you think about Team Smith?
Absolutely. She definitely addressed the shooting from the outside in acquiring Brown. But then I think that this is a well-balanced roster overall. The addition of Christy Bellick, who earned MVP honors in Game 17 this week. She's a strong addition off the bench. She can provide that scoring and that defense around the perimeter as well for Team Smith. So I think they might be able to go 3-0 this week with this roster. And finally, let's take a look at Team Sims. She's number 1 on the leaderboard, and she's been a captain for 4 straight weeks coming into season 2 of AAU. She has a 9-4 record in gold with a win percentage of 66.67%. And I love that she's running it back with Jordan Canada, who moved up 3 spots on the leaderboard and sits at number 5. I was a little surprised that Courtney Williams was a late pick in the draft in the 5th round, but I do also love the addition of Crystal Bradford, who's one of the top rebounders in the league and also one of the top point earners this week coming into Athletes Unlimited Week 4.
Yeah, you mentioned Jordan Canada, but there's another in that mix that's been together for 3 weeks, and that's Jamaris Davis. So her, Sims, and Canada have been on the same team. But when Odyssey drafted this team this week, it was unlike any that she's done in the past. And I'm a little confused and interested why she did it. So usually Odyssey builds her teams around guards exclusively. And in particular, ones that can really run the floor, have high energy, and are fast paced. But then she went out and got three bigs in a row. And I use quotations because I'm throwing Crystal Bradford in that mix too, because she's kind of a chameleon on the court. So she got Jasmine Walker, big 40, then Davis, like she always does, and then Bradford. And I know it shocked Melissa Smith because she looked over at Odyssey at one point in the draft and went, three bigs in a row? Really? I think she thought she was going to get to draft Crystal Bradford. So Odyssey changed her strategy this week. This team looks different to me on paper than any that she's put together in the previous 3 weeks. So I'm interested to see why she did that and how these individuals are going to come together as a team. But next, we're going to dig into a little bit of each player as how they're doing statistically on their own. Obviously, they're on new teams this week, and we're going to bring in a guest to help us do that.
We welcome basketball news reporter Nekias Duncan to the show. Nekias, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hope you two are doing well.
We're so pumped to have you on, especially just kind of pick your brain about basketball this season as a whole. I think the first thing I really wanted to start off with, especially with all your experience covering the WNBA and the NBA, obviously the Athletes Unlimited being a newer league from last season, and then really through these first 3 weeks of this season, what do you think is the biggest point of growth for players when they come to play at AU, whether it's an aspect of their game or a way that they develop? And is there anyone you've seen that positively translate to the W?
I think for me, because AU is naturally a smaller league and because of the nature of drafting every week, there's a lack of continuity. So I think it's more, I guess it's more concept based versus, okay, this team runs this and this is how we attack this. And when we see this coverage, we're going to do this. I think it kind of opens itself up to players that can naturally create advantages for themselves. And I think for younger players who get a little bit more leeway, if they're the sixth woman on their team, they may be a starting point guard or a starting three or whatever in AU. I think you just get more on-ball responsibility. And so you get to really test out what you can do, what kind of reads you can make. You're also tested more because now you're seeing better defenders naturally. And so I think just with how more open the game is on the AU side, I think you get to see that creativity kind of shine through.
Being captains and having these leadership role, I think it could possibly be years into their W career before we see them step into a role like that. But at AU, they get to do it in year one as a pro, which is so unique.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. You see that with someone like Kirsten Bell, who didn't get a ton of run with the Aces, naturally veteran-led squad, a lot of star power in the starting lineup. And now you see her in AU, and she is taking jumper after jumper after drive after jumper. And you kind of see what made her a high pick to begin with. And you also see why, okay, like maybe this is why within what the Aces want to do, you need a more confined role to kind of rein that in. But it's been fun watching her really explore her stuff offensively. Also, if the jumper does get better, like that's just more reason to play her more next season. I think there's still going to be some minutes there in the front court to do so. But like she pops out. I go back to last year, and I think we all knew Lexi Brown could shoot. But the multiple ways that she was used as a shooter in AU, just having the ball in her hands more, coming off of more screens, it really made that skill set pop for her. And we saw a little bit of that translate with the Sparks. I think she got more opportunity because there was more of a spotlight on her in AU with what that skill was, how good it was, and how versatile it is. And so I guess just a couple situations like that where you can kind of see, okay, this is what a player can really do in a more wide open setting. And then for, I guess, like W evaluators is figuring out, okay, how much room do we have to really expand and explore with this when that player comes back?
And one player who sort of changed the narrative surrounding her gameplay and her leadership here at AU is Odyssey Sims. She's earned the top spot on that leaderboard for 3 straight weeks, and she's been the gold team's captain for her entire time this season at AU. So what stands out to you the most about Odyssey Sims, her gameplay?
Ooh, with Odyssey, I think what stands out to me most, she's just a walking paint touch. She gets to the paint, gets to the rim whenever she wants to, can get all the way to the rim, can get to a floater whenever she wants to. Ultimately, like we've seen this with her on the W side as well. We saw it during the stretch run with Connecticut. We saw it during her All-Star season a few years ago. There aren't many guards that can stay in front of her, and the few guards that can stay in front of her, they don't have the necessary strength to kind of keep her from getting from her spots either. And so in a wide open league like this, the primary question is, okay, how can we scramble this defense? How can we get them in rotation? How can we open things up? And I think because Odyssey is able to access the paint as often as she does, she's able to lead AU in scoring. Like I was checking her game log a little bit earlier. She's averaged like 27 points per game during this AU season, which is insane. But it's not just the shot attempts and how she's getting them up, it's where she's getting them. She's also leading AU in free throw attempts. And, you know, we talk about the 3-point revolution that's kind of taken over basketball, period, at this point. Shots at the rim are still the most valuable shots in basketball, and free throws are the most valuable or most efficient shots in basketball. And having Odyssey on the floor kind of guarantees that you're going to get a healthy dose of those. And so just watching her get to her spots and getting downhill pretty much whenever she wants to is kind of pop for me.
Well, Nekias, thank you so much for joining us here on the Athletes Unlimited preview show. And we really love your insight and your picks for the week.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's been a blast to watch. I feel like I've been binging a bunch of basketball over the past couple of weeks, but it's been an enjoyable league. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of share the space with y'all. I really appreciate what y'all are doing.
Thank you. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
So we're officially past the halfway point of the 2023 season, and I think it's time for us to discuss who we think should be champion.
Absolutely. Right now, all eyes are on Odyssey Sims and NaLyssa Smith. They've stayed at the top consistently through the season, but let's dig into exactly how they're doing it. First, the ways that they are winning points. Their breakdown of leaderboard points is similar, if not identical, in categories like win points. Odyssey has the edge in stat points, but then NaLyssa has 30 more MVP points than Odyssey. Really, where you can get into the nitty-gritty is their stat point breakdown. Made twos are almost identical. NaLyssa's just a little more efficient, probably because she's right under the basket more often. The key stat for Sims is her assists. She's the league leader with 77. That's 770 points total. And then NaLyssa's key stat category is rebound. She leads the league in that category with 111. She's picked up 735 points off of rebounds alone. So even though it's in different categories, they're picking up same points there. Here's where things differ from three. Obviously, Odyssey takes a lot of long-range shots. She is going to miss some, clearly. She shoots 34.5%, but she's picked up 220 points in the category. NaLyssa, on the other hand, has only gained 20 points from three. And then there's turnovers. Because Odyssey is a more dominant ball handler, often the point guard of her team, she's lost 320 points from turnovers, and then NaLyssa has lost 250. Clearly, we have a tight race. Christina, how does this compare to the leaderboard finish in those last 2 weeks in the inaugural season?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it is a tight race, but that's also because there's a new point system this season. This time last year, Tiana Hawkins led number 2 Natasha Cloud by 908 points on that leaderboard. So it was more of a deadlock on who would be crowned champion. And this season, we have more of a tight competition, as you mentioned, where Odyssey Sims only leads by 265 points on that leaderboard over NaLyssa Smith. So it's anyone's game. And so this week will be very crucial on determining what happens in week 5.
Yeah, almost 1,000 points is extremely difficult to make up with 2 weeks left. But here's where, if NaLyssa is going to make a run, especially in week 4, that it's important, and it's when they play each other. They're both going 2-1. But NaLyssa's loss is always to Odyssey. So those 2 quarters that they lost on Saturday night, losing the 150 win points, that's when you saw Odyssey pull back ahead of NaLyssa on the leaderboard. So if one of them is going to stay in the lead, in Odyssey's case, or pull ahead for NaLyssa, they have to beat each other when they go head-to-head. And as the orange and gold team captains, that's the best game of the weekend. It's the last one on Saturday night. I know we talked about NaLyssa and Odyssey, but if there's one dark horse in this race, I would say it's Naz Hillman. Naz has been hanging out in the top 4, but here's what it would take for her to pass Sims and Smith. She would have to have an undefeated week. And if there's a time to do it, it's now in week 4. She needs to elevate her individual game just a little bit. She hasn't broken 20 points at all this season except for her 33-point night. I know she gets a ton on rebounds, but she really needs to make herself a focal point of the offense, which she absolutely can be on her team in order to pull ahead with the stats. I'm confident in how Hillman can manage a team. That's what she gets better at week to week as a captain, so I think she's got that down. And then she's the only captain this week who kept her core group together. Everybody else formed teams that they hadn't really played with, but Naz stuck with her bread and butter, and like we talked about earlier in the show, it looks a lot like her week 3 team.
That's not to forget about the latest rocket to the top of the rankings in Kirsten Bell. Bell moved up 6 spots on the leaderboard in week 3 and sits at number 3, just 1 point behind Naz Hillman. She earned 3 MVP honors this week and averaged 21 points in week 3. She currently ranks 3rd in three-pointers with 37. And I think that this is going to be the week that we see maybe a change in tide in that number 3, number 4 position. I mean, they're neck and neck right now in the leaderboard.
Yeah, by no means am I counting KB out. She made such a significant jump last week, but she is the one unknown. She hasn't led a team before. This is her first week as a captain, but she is in charge of her own destiny this week in that role. And if you follow the Captain's Journal, you'll get to learn a little bit more about KB. Tomorrow, the full episode comes out on AU Pro Sports Social. I can't wait for you to see it, but for now, you can see KB make her captain's debut.
Absolutely, and that game tips off against Team Smith at 7 p.m. on CBS Sports. That's all we have this week for the Athletes Unlimited preview show. I'm Christina Williams, joined by my co-host Savannah Collins. We're sending it over to Cindy and Cheryl for coverage.